let's get ourselves up to speed. The overall topic we've been looking at is, even though we learned that the most central thing, the ikar, the core of Judaism, is in all these physical actions that we do, and that is the closest we can get to God because that is completely transparent to God. And that makes a home for God here in the lowest realm, which is, as we learned, the purpose of creation. Once we've done that, once we have a physical mitzvah that we've created here, we want to give that mitzvah a soul. We want to infuse it with a soul, because a physical mitzvah, although it's completely transparent to the Ein Sof, it only lets a tiny little bit of light in because it's physical. But our emotions, that lets a lot more light in. So we want to infuse that physical mitzvah with an emotional soul that's going to let more and more of that light in. That we already made it visible and transparent. We just want to increase now the luminescence, make it even brighter. So we're creating a home for God. We're creating a home that has a lot of light, and the light comes through our love and our awe that we put into the physical mitzvah. And in this chapter, we're going through the actual technique, the technical side of how you can take that mitzvah and elevate it, so to speak, through a more and more luminous soul for the mitzvah to various spiritual worlds. We talked about, if I just do it without Kavanah, and then it's just a plain mitzvah that I did because I'm Jewish and I think I should, now it stays down here, doesn't join with any godliness. If I do it with a natural love and awe, that I just scratch the surface and it's there because I'm Jewish and I love doing Jewish things, now it can rise to the world of what we call Yetzirah. It's a second spiritual world that is a world dominated by emotions. But if I do the meditation process that we've learned, and you can look back at earlier lessons to learn the long, short path, at that point, now I've generated my emotions with my intellect, with meditation. They're rooted in the third world of Bria, and those mitzvahs will rise up and unite with the 10 Sfirot, with the godliness in the world of Bria. So if that's a lot of terminology, go back, watch the last 4 or 5 classes. But a beautiful technique to know how you can give your mitzvah wings and how you can aim at various spiritual worlds. And there's a secret we learned, which is that on Shabbat and on Yontiv and high holidays, as we said, and on festivals and on Rosh Chodesh, there actually is a pillar that opens up between the lower and the higher of those 2 spiritual worlds we discussed, Yetzirah and Bria. And even if you just naturally used your love to get your mitzvahs to the world of Yetzirah, on Shabbat you can give them a boost through that pillar, because the worlds are elevated, and you can bring them to the world of Bria just using the elevated status of those days. So lots of technical kung fu about how to get our mitzvahs higher and higher once we've done them. And we also touched on the work of a big tzaddikim, which is in the world of Atzilus, which is all about not emotions anymore, or even intellect, but about complete nullification, complete bitul, complete surrender to the awareness that there's only God and there's no me. So these tzaddikim, there's no ego, there's no barrier for them to work with. They wake up and it's all godliness somehow. You can only imagine what the mind of this tzaddik and the heart of this tzaddik feels like. They still have intellect and emotions, but it's just oneness with God. That's their base reality. So that's work in the world of Atzilus, and we get a little taste of that every time we do the Amidah, right? Baruch atah Adon Hashem Elokeinu, and we bow. That's a sense of self-nullification that pervades the Amidah, and we touch for a moment the level of even these great tzaddikim. So let's dive back in. Now we came to the concept on page 567 here in chapter 39 that the Alter Rebbe says the reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. V'hinei schar mitzvah mitzvah. And we talked at the end of the last class. Okay, we learned about the light that we're creating in Gan Eden, whether we do a mitzvah with kavanah of this kind or that kind, and we elevate it even more light if it's on Shabbat. And great, my soul is going to have all this light after 120 years that it will enjoy of what I accomplished. But we said, hold on. The whole point of the Tanya is to not be self-centered, to be other-centered. So why now, at the end of all this learning about the mitzvah and the kavanah, why am I concerned about how much light I'm going to get? Was that the whole point? That Now I should just have a spiritual ego instead of a physical ego. Was that where we're headed? So the Alter Rebbe makes sure that we're not now caught up again in a spiritual self-centeredness of I'm doing this because I'm creating my heaven, my light, the beauty I'm going to see. Really, what is the most powerful aspect of this is not my reward, but is the mitzvah itself. So the point of studying about this light, about this reward, was not to learn about the reward that I'm going to get. It's to learn about how powerful that mitzvah was to begin with that's creating the reward. Because as we said, with real cause and effect, the effect is directly coming out of the cause, and you can see it, you can learn about it. So if I see an effect, I know the cause. If I know Shakespeare wrote a beautiful play and I read the play, I know something about Shakespeare's mind because Shakespeare wrote that play, caused it. If I see the paycheck that Shakespeare got for writing the play, that's just a sum of money. And I could say, oh, it's so many gold pieces or whatever they had in that time, but I don't know what caused that. It could have been anything. It could have been a play. It could have been music. It could have been other work. The check or the money that Shakespeare gotten was not directly caused by Shakespeare. That was just because someone might have paid him, a royal person might have paid him to write a play. The play itself, that's the direct effect of the cause. So a mitzvah, that creates its own reward. And the light that we learn about, that's directly created by the mitzvah. It's not that God says, oh, Smolash, you've been good today. I'm going to give you some light for later. Here's your reward. The mitzvah is actually creating all of this. So what does that mean? The entirety of Gan Eden, of heaven, the lower and the higher, all that we look forward to perhaps as spiritual seekers, that's not the point. That just lets us know how powerful the mitzvah we're doing right now is, because the mitzvah is actually creating all of heaven. That's why, one of the great Hasidic masters said, if one tzitzit from one of our taluses could get into heaven, it would evaporate all of heaven. You don't understand the power of a mitzvah. The word of the mitzvah is just teaching you about the power of the mitzvah itself, because, of course, what creates something is more powerful than it.
Is he talking about the afterlife?
We'll go inside. Any questions?
Yeah. Is he talking about the afterlife here? Is he talking about the afterlife here?
Yeah. That's not the world to come, but the afterlife. So when you're out of your body, when you've gone through whatever wash and dry cycle, and now you're in the trove of souls in heaven again, now you see completely with spiritual eyes. You don't have a brain to rationalize or to focus on the physical, and you see completely abstract. You see the entirety and the depth of the beauty of the good you've done. You recognize the entirety and the depth of the counterproductive you've done, but that's taken care of. So now you're just looking at the good you've done, and it's ecstasy for a soul. It's total ecstasy. But that's not the point. The only reason the Alter Rebbe is teaching us this is so we know what's creating that whole Gan Eden. The tzitzit that I'm wearing at my bar mitzvah at Temple Israel, right? Or the matzah that I'm going to eat at Pesach. Any other questions? That's the direction. Let's go inside. So page 567, Vihine, schar mitzvah, mitzvah.
The reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself.
The reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. So that's that concept. Don't think that the reason I'm telling you about all this light and these different levels of Gan Eden is so you should now dedicate yourself to collecting light for yourself and have a nefesh b'amit that's just concerned with spiritual matters. No, I taught it to you so you know the incredible importance of what it is you're doing every day when you get up and say the Shema or give a coin to tzedakah. Perush mischara nida mahuta umadregata.
This means that we can know the essential nature and rank of the mitzvah by its reward, by the nature of the light generated by the mitzvah and revealed to the soul as its reward.
So that's the point. We're looking at a simple mitzvah we do every day, and we have to realize how stupendous the importance is that we're actually we're generating Gan Eden just by doing this mitzvah. And it feeds on itself, because if you feel the love and the awe of doing a mitzvah and you know you're generating Gan Eden, and then that knowledge that you're now generating Gan Eden fills you with more love and awe, you keep going higher every year, every week. And by the way, Tully Silverberg pointed out in one of the classes I was looking at, the same is true about the negative, although we don't dwell on it. But when I lie to somebody, when I yell at somebody, when I give in and don't fulfill a mitzvah that I said I was going to do, whatever it might be, now the negative is also true. Gehenna, which is the negative place the soul goes to for a certain amount of time to be cleansed of its counterproductive acts. That also is being generated by the negative counterproductive things that I do. So it also can fill me on the negative side with a sense of awe and restraint and respect that if I take it upon myself to not tell stories or tell lies, I'm going to recognize it's not just random. I'm creating tremendous negative consequences when I do that. But we like to focus on the positive, so let's stick to that.
Now we will not concern ourselves with explaining hidden matters.
Right. So this book is for me and you. It's for regular Jewish people who want to learn to operate at the highest spiritual level, which usually is the level of a Beinoni, as we've learned. So he's not gonna go into what the deal is with these tzaddikim and the world of Atzilus and how you can do Avodah in the world of Atzilus. We're gonna stick to what we need to know. Shehem tzaddikim hagedolim, shehem bivchinat merkava.
Meaning the great tzaddikim who are at the level of a chariot whose divine service comes under the heading of hidden matters because it transcends understanding.
Right, so he's not gonna explain to us the mystical workings of how a great tzaddik does work in Atzilus. The whole point of us learning any of this was for us to have a better understanding of what was causing all this light, which is the work I do when I do a mitzvah. So this is called avodah or avodah in modern Hebrew. So when I do the physical mitzvah, that's great. Now starts the inner work of how much love and how much awe did I generate? How devoted was I internally when I did the mitzvah? Those are the wings that will elevate the mitzvah. So the Alter Rebbe only wants us to understand that avodah, that work, so that we can understand the importance of the mitzvah. Everybody following?
Sort of.
Is that a yes? Yes?
That was a sort of.
Oh, sorry. What's the confusion? Is there any?
It's just very deep and not anything that I already know and not anything that is like from around here, So it's difficult to I'm thinking about it is what I'm saying.
Yeah, got it. I agree. Growing up, in my community, there's in Montreal, an Israeli family, and we did the holidays as a, cultural identity thing. The idea that this mitzvah is so powerful that it's creating heaven, it's a life changer. It's so outside of how I was raised. And yet, if you can insert that lens, insert that slide in front of your way of interpreting the world, now every mitzvah is just such a cause for celebration.
It's a filter.
It's a filter. It's a new filter. And that's exactly it. When we change the filters of our mind, we create entirely new emotions. You ever wonder why it is there's this stereotype of Hasidim dancing and singing and being happy?
Because they are.
Yes, they are, yeah. So it's not some quaint stereotype. And it's really to be happy all the time, or practically all the time, is I think it's quite an advanced emotional and spiritual skill to just see the world in a way that makes you happy all the time and to just have joy all the time. I promise you, even though in art it's sort of a stereotype, I've told the story of this one chassid when I go to Jerusalem, and there's a minyan that I daven with, and the chassid that reads the Torah. Every time I see him, he looks like he just won like the Mega Million lottery. I can't. The moment you look at him, you're like, oh, something amazing just happened to this guy. He's beaming with joy. He's just, and this is 6:15 in the morning, right? This is at the Kotel, 6:15 in the morning in the cold. I got up, I had some coffee, I slept over. I was worried I'm going to get hit by a car in that little alley where you're driving and the cars are going by, and I get there, and am I going to get a stender? And it's chaotic, and this guy's just standing there. Like he just, like his daughter just got married. Like he just had the best day in his life. And I've never seen him in any other state but that. It's shocking. And there's many people in the community I've met personally who I find that's just their go-to, right? Their normal emotional state is joy. So this is what does it. If you take a new lens and you insert it and you repeat that lens over and over until it becomes your standard, now you generate new emotions. And as a Jew, why not accept that a mitzvah is creating heaven, and that it's so important that all of Gan Eden is being generated right now? And that makes me, I'm thrilled at the opportunity to do it, rather than just, I promised myself I would do this, and it's now a week, and I'm not so sure it was the right idea. Well, but I'm going to push through, right? Which is the better state of mind to overcome any barriers? It's joy. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. This is really foreign stuff, but it's as powerful as it is perhaps new. Yeah, Dan?
I thought one of the objectives is to make room for God at our level through doing mitzvot. To bring him down, we're trying to go up to, levels. And I thought the objective is to make room for God down at our level.
No, very well put. Absolutely. That is the ikar. That is the whole point we're starting from, which is we're making a dira b'tachtonim, a home for God here. But once we've done that, now do we want it to be a home that's dark and forced, and I pushed myself and I did it? Or do you want that home to be a beautiful lit home with lots of emotions that elevate that physical act? So yes, the starting place is we're making a home for God here, and that itself should give me joy. But now we want to understand the aspects of avodah, of work that bring light into that home and elevate that act, so that I'll understand how to do that avodah with joy. So both are true.
Okay.
All right, let's go on. Yeah, it's this is a conversation that is beautiful. It can go on, but I want to get inside. Rak haniglot lanu she'acharehem kol adam yimshoch. Do we know who we're at? Who's reading now? Can someone remind me? Dan, did you read?
Doreen,
Okay,
Doreen.
I think,
Oh, Doreen, go ahead.
okay. But only with those matters revealed to us, to which every man must aspire. That is, only with those levels of divine service which may and ought to be attained by every Jew as follows.
Here, so in case that cut out, but only with those matters revealed to us, to which every man must aspire, that is, only with those levels of divine service which may and ought to be attained by every Jew as follows. This is something we can all do. We're not talking about the service of some great tzaddik. We're talking about a normal, everyday Jewish person with a normal, everyday Jewish soul, and what we're here to do and how we can do it, and it's tremendous work we can do. By the way, hi on Facebook to Nancy, Jenna, right, Benji, Margie. Please, guys, any questions, put them right in the comments, and we'll bring them into the class. Leda nemana mahut madrega avodat Hashem bitchilu rechimu bihitgalut libo.
One must know with certainty that the essential nature and rank of divine service with fear and love revealed in the heart.
הנמשכות מן הבינה והדעת בגדולת אין סוף ברוך הוא. Let's go on next.
Do you want me to
Let's go back
continue?
to Noreen. Yeah, Noreen, if you'll unmute and go ahead.
I'm sorry, I had to take a call from a doctor. Where are we?
Oh,
I can do it.
derived from on 568, third chunk.
Okay. Derived from understanding and knowledge of the greatness of the blessed Ein Sof, and of which it was said earlier that the reward for divine service motivated by such love and fear is on the level of the world of Berea.
So this was the technique. Yeah, this is what the technique we learned. That I know you're not a tzaddik, the Alter Rebbe says. I know you got normal struggles. You're struggling every day. If you're working hard, you're at the level of a Beinoni. But you should know you can do this. If you meditate on a divine concept and your intellect creates emotions, and those emotions, you infuse a mitzvah with those emotions, even if they're subtle, that when you do that, you can elevate that Torah mitzvah to the level of the 10 Sefirot of Bria. Believe it or not, you and I can do this. And they will unite with the godliness, the 10 Sefirot in the world of Bria. Now, am I a big tzaddik or a spiritual person? I'll see them flying up. I'll see the wings in the intellect of my mind, and I'll see the angels going ooh and ah as they go by and unite. No, right? This is not something for highly spiritual people necessarily. I mean, they benefit too. But this is the work that we do, and you do it even by feel. There's a sense of inner knowing, and you get a sense of what the connection is and what's happening. It may be all abstract. It may be all in that inner screen of knowing and the eyes of your mind. But the Alter Rebbe says, rest assured, do this work, and that's where your mitzvahs go. And know the importance of what you're doing, that you're creating Gan Eden as you're doing this mitzvah with those intellectually generated emotions, the technique we learned.
Cantor, I thought the 10 Sefirot were in all the worlds, so it's not, you don't unite with it in Yetzirah or Asiya?
Yes, also in Yetzirah, and also in Asiya, and also in Atzilus. So they're all inter-included, and we did say, if I work with natural emotions and unite them with the 10 Sefirot in Yetzirah, in the second world, well, the Ein Sof is included in Chochmah of Atzilus, which goes through Malchut, which comes to Chochmah of Yetzirah, which now comes to Malchut of Yetzirah. And there, when I unite in Yetzirah, they actually wind up uniting with the Ein Sof. So you get to God, no matter what world you're working in.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of the light that I generate, there, if I actually manage to get my mitzvahs to Bria and to unite with its 10 Sefirot there, it's a much higher level of light. That's the higher Gan Eden. So
you
your
get more
point is
into
true.
the Chachma, Bina stuff in
Say
the
that again?
higher. Do you get more into the intellectual levels of the Sefirot when you're in Bria? And the more
Probably.
emotional
Yeah,
ones? in
probably, because
Yetzirah?
Bria is dominated by Bina to begin with. So I mean, you're the nature of all the Sefirot are there, but there's all the Sefirot as they are inter-included within Bina. So you're really, you're creating a lot of light at the level of Bina, but it's probably.
Okay.
Where are we? Yeah, from this word mim koma b'yud Sefirot divria.
From this
From this-
reward, we know that it is placed the level of such service of mitzvot performed with such motivation is in the 10 Sefirot of Bria.
So that's for a normal Jewish person, that's really the very highest place. That is the godliness, the highest godliness possible within my normal consciousness, without getting into the Atzilus business. Oh, I got someone in the waiting room. Hi. And even if I had to work and it's not tremendous overflowing emotions where tears are streaming down my face, even if it's just subtle emotions, that's where they've gone if I've done the work. Rest assured, says the Alter Rebbe. And let's continue with Rick. Avodah b'tchilu rechimu hativit shebemocho.
And the service motivated by natural fear and love hidden in one's mind, not emotions experienced in the heart, but mental awareness of one's inborn love and fear of God, of which it was said earlier that such service is rewarded in the world of Yetzirah.
Right, so if you remember, we talked about way back in the short long path that I know I'd give my life to not be disconnected from God, and so that mental awareness that awakes enough of that hidden, that natural love to inspire me to do something. It may not be again, I'm not leaping and dancing, but yeah, I know I have those emotions, and I awake enough of them to do this. That means that it winds up in uniting with the 10 Sefirot of Yetzirah, the 10 Sefirot of Yetzirah. B'yud Sefirot Yetzirah aval avodah bli hitarut d'chilu rechimu afil b'mocho b'vchinat gilui. Let's do 2 from this reward.
But divine.
Let's go from the
From
bottom.
this.
Let's include that from this reward. We know that
From
it's
this reward.
place.
Okay. is in the 10 Sfirot of Yetzirah.
Right.
But
And
divine
going on?
service, or you want to stop there?
No, sorry, let's go on.
But divine service performed without arousing one's fear and love to a revealed state, even in one's mind.
Okay, so now we understand the avodah, the work that it takes to generate emotions that will allow a Torah mitzvah to elevate and unite in the world of Bria with the 10 Sefirot. The natural emotions that if I harness them will allow the Torah mitzvah to unite in the world of Yetzirah. But what if I didn't? I was too much in a rush. It was not a day to dwell on the thing. There was an emergency going on. I just got it done, made sure it was done, didn't stop to think about it. Maybe I was even on a little bit of automatic, but I know it's a mitzvah. I did it. What happens to that? Dahinu l'rehava hativit hamisuteret balev, l'otzia me'hahelem v'hister halev.
To be revealed at least in one's conscious mind and in the latency of his heart, so that it might evoke, if not passionate fervor, then at least a mental resolve to cleave to God by fulfilling the mitzvot.
And so I didn't even get to the point where, never mind, I didn't have a strong emotion and I wasn't dancing or crying, whatever it was. Nothing. I didn't dwell on it. I just, boom, I did. I know it's a mitzvah I said I would do. I did it, move on. What happens to that? Raki nisheret musuteret balev ketoladeta kmo shehaita kodem avodah.
If instead the love remains hidden in the heart as in its native state, as it was before the divine service when it was surely concealed, not expressing itself in divine service. If the love is similarly hidden when he engages in divine service and the mitzvah that he does are in no way affected by the love, then.
Right, so I do have hidden love, as he said, and every Jew has a burning love hidden in their heart to be connected with God. But I didn't take time to just scratch that and a little bit of it out enough to motivate the mitzvah of that. I just did it maybe because I'm accustomed to doing it. That mitzvah, what happens? Hare avodah zo nisheret lemata b'olam haperud hanikra chitzoniut haolamot.
Such service remains below in this world of separation, in the level called externality of the worlds, as opposed to the Sefirot, which are the internal aspect of the worlds.
Right, so we discussed these various spiritual worlds. We discussed which of the Sefirot dominate each of those worlds. Chochmah dominates Atzilus, Bina dominates Bria, the Midot dominate Yetzirah, the emotional world, and then Malchut dominates Asiya, the physical action world, so to speak. But that doesn't mean that whole world is just godliness. Each of those Sefirot, they are the godliness of that world, and then there's the externality of that world. The best way to understand it is that the Sefirot have vessels and light. Vessels and light. So when you talk about chesed, or when you talk about bina, there's bina, the vessel, and then there's the light, the Ein Sof, that flows into that vessel of bina. In all three worlds that we've been discussing, Asiya, Yetzirah, and Bria, the vessels are something like actual separate created beings, right? Bria allows for separate created beings, and so when you're in Bria, the world of the intellect, chesed, loving kindness, has a boundary around it. In other words, it's not gevura, right? Chesed is something other than gevura. Loving kindness is not strength. Loving kindness is not acknowledgement. Loving kindness is loving kindness, so it's a thing, right? It's separate. Then the Ein Sof, which is like a simple light, flows into that, and you have a light in that vessel, and that's the whole structure for this conversation of the Sefirot. So the vessels of the Sefirot, that's the externality of the worlds, and that creates all kinds of what we call, palaces and levels and whatever we call them, rooms. chambers within each of these worlds, and that's the various spiritual levels of those worlds. That's where the souls are when they are rooted in those worlds. When a mitzvah is done with love and awe, it flows and is united with the light inside the vessel. When it's done without love and awe, it stays down here in the world of Yetzirah, and not even in the godliness of Yetzirah, but only in the externality of the world. So it basically is floating around pretty much close to this level of consciousness, as opposed to being able to go up and unite with the 10 Sefirot. And that's the take home. The problem, if I do a mitzvah without any kavanah whatsoever, is not that I'm not going to receive light, and I lost my Gan Eden bank account is not as high as it should be. The problem is the mitzvah isn't allowed to elevate. The mitzvah doesn't have the light. God's home down here is a dark place. It hasn't been lit up. So this is where we've been going. We're not worried about the reward. We're worried that the Torah mitzvah that I did now can't go up and unite with the Ein Sof. So you see, even here, where we're talking about Gan Eden and light and Kavanah, the focus is never, oh, well, poor me, I didn't get my light, or yay for me, look how much light I created. It's, I created this home for God, now it's my job to make sure that that's elevated properly, and that God has a beautiful lit home that God's going to get nachas from. So even now, at the end of this journey, the point wasn't myself, it was other-centered. Make sense? Over the page. It is not. Ve'ein ba koach la'alot v'likalel b'yichudo yitbarech she'en eses sefirot ha'kedushot. We're at, who's reading?
Is Paula reading or you want me to take it?
You.
Paula, wait, can you do for us top of 570? You need to unmute, please.
It has not the power to rise and to be absorbed in God's unity, meaning the 10 holy Sefirot. Going?
That's it. Uchmo shekatuv batikunim divla dechilurchimu la parcha le'ela la yachla lesalka lemekam kadam Hashem.
As is written in Tikkun Zohar, that without fear and love, it does not fly upward and it cannot rise to stand before God.
So it's a beautiful image. Right? We talk about how when you say Psalms, they fly up and stand right before God. That's what it's about. I'm worried that God should have nachas. I'm worried that my Torah mitzvahs should have light and should be elevated. And my reward afterwards, that, I'm aware of that, but that shouldn't be my motivating factor. And just one point, I just want to touch, for those that studied all the intro to Kabbalah and the various Sefirot, when I talked about the Sefirot having vessels and lights, and the vessels being some kind of a created being, that only applies to the 3 lower spiritual worlds. When you get to the world of Atzilus, that's a special world where it's all godliness. And there, the light and the vessels, it's all godliness. Somehow, Chesed as a vessel exists, but still just completely united with godliness. So that distinction does not apply in the world of Atzilus, only Bria and down. Just to clarify if anyone had that question. V'hayinu afilu imeino osek shelo lishma mamash shum ezo pnia chas v'shalom.
This inability of one's divine service to ascend to the Sefirot applies not only where one's motive for engaging in Torah and Mitzvot is actually shelo lishma, not for its own sake. That is, for some ulterior motive, heaven forbid, in which case one is actually serving himself, not God, and his service surely cannot ascend to stand before God.
So now we're getting into different levels of when I do something without kavanah. There's without kavanah and there's without kavanah. So I was just on automatic. I didn't have a strong feeling. I didn't stop and create an intention with devotion. As I said, a dryly done mitzvah or dryly done Torah study. So that's not lo lishmo. Sorry, let's back up and define this term. So lishmo means for God's sake, for the sake of God's name. So when I do anything lishmo, that's where, again, I'm completely other-centered. I'm doing it for the sake of God, that God should have a home here in my actual physical world, in my consciousness. And then I want to fill that world with light, also for the sake of the Torah and mitzvahs and God. It's other-centered. So that's how you do something lowly shmo. I want to be united with God. I want God to have a home here. I want that to be filled with light. And that's the optimal way to do any Jewish act that creates the most change in the world. If I don't do it with that kavanah, now it's not like hardcore lowly shmo. It's just I missed out, and we'll learn what happens with that. But if I do it for a self-centered reason, like genuinely for a self-centered reason, oh, you know what? I could get a better job if I learn these subjects. I'm going to get paid more money. So quick, let me learn. So now I can make more money, right? I mean, it can happen, right? Or, I see how Torah scholars are treated. They really have high standing. I'd like to have high standing. I'd like people to respect me and look up to me and come ask me questions. Let me learn Torah. So now people look up to me. I'll be better than everybody else, right? You can see how that can happen. Very tempting when you start to get caught up in that. And if you do get caught up in that, that is genuinely lo lishmo. And that's just your animal soul learning Torah. That's all it is. Your animal soul now put on a nice hat and put a sign on the door saying, I'm a this or I'm a that. And now your animal soul is learning Torah. And as we'll learn, you can take all this light and all this potential and drag it right down into the klipa, the negative side of reality, into my own ego world, so to speak. So we should know that if you do it with enough self-centered intention, it can actually become a negative phenomenon. Yes, Rick?
What about different levels of mitzvot, such as reading Torah or studying Torah versus putting a coin in a tzedakah box or something not quite as, it's so much easier to raise the level than mitzvot when you're studying Torah than it is to throw a coin in a tzedakah box.
Interesting. You pick two mitzvahs that are considered like the most all-encompassing, all-inclusive, most powerful mitzvahs. So Torah study and tzedakah, those are the two that I'd say, if I want an example of, a light mitzvah, so to speak, those are the big, climactic mitzvahs of the day. But I hear what you're saying. Say, I'm eating dairy, but now I'm eating only dairy, with a special kashrut, or
Okay.
Okay. I'm buying matzah, but I'm gonna buy not shmur matzah, but I'm gonna first bake shmur matzah, right? So like adding to a mitzvah or some. So definitely there's a distinction that the big mitzvahs create more light. The big mitzvahs are all encompassing, but in the end, we're talking about bigger or smaller chunks of infinity. So even a small mitzvah, we don't want to do math and weigh them and say, well, this is just a light mitzvah. I'm only creating a teaspoon of infinity instead of a bucket of infinity. You're talking about infinity, so you never know. It's hard to judge. It's hard to ascertain in our finite minds what positivity we create once we're dealing with infinity. But yeah, the major mitzvahs like fasting on Yom Kippur, that's one we really want to focus on. Whereas, maybe one of the day fasts during the year, that's not as important as fasting on Yom Kippur for sure.
But it's a lot easier for us to elevate those mitzvahs as opposed to eating dairy in a certain way, correct?
I think it's person to person. I think some people have stuff they love and naturally love doing. One person might just get such a thrill out of giving tzedakah. We have amazing donors at Temple, and they give millions and millions of dollars. I mean, I can't imagine being able to part with that much money if I had it. You know what I mean? And they have a joy of giving it. They give it so wholeheartedly. I don't know if it's hard for them. Maybe it's like easy for them to create all this light around that amazing mitzvah. Someone else might love learning Torah. Noreen over here, this is her second Torah class of the day, right?
Right.
So, Third.
Yeah.
I don't know that I could have gotten up and done 2 Torah classes before this, so maybe it's harder for me to elevate my Torah learning than it is for Noreen, who just turns, it lights up her batteries, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's person to person. Yeah.
Can I ask if, when you say the mitzvahs that you do quickly and you just do it. You don't have to think about it. You don't have time to dwell on it or bring up the emotions and stuff. Is it better not to do those because if it can drag you down? Or is it better to do the mitzvah and, okay, I did it not so good this time? Or is it better, I better not do the mitzvah because I can't put everything into it?
Yeah, definitely still do them. Definitely still do them. And so yes, definitely, even if it's being done lowly shmo, that's not a reason not to do it. You still do it. The Alter Rebbe will address this later. There's ways to re-elevate them depending on what the mitzvah was. The only times you really shouldn't is if I'm specifically learning Torah, God forbid. I shouldn't if I'm specifically learning Torah in order to put someone else down. So if I'm thinking, oh, that Shmuel at the Beis Midrash, he's always bringing up this point about this. I'm gonna go deep and learn something so I can embarrass him and make him look bad when he brings up the next point. I'm gonna show that Shmuel. If that's why I'm learning it, now I'm bringing it so low into the klipa that I should just close the book, go take a walk, clear my mind, get myself in a better place, and come back to where at least I'm learning it without an intention that's hating another Jew, God forbid. Right? So that's the rare time where the Torah says, if that's what you're doing, stop. Almost any other situation, even if it's on automatic, it's still better to do it than to not do it because it will lead to you doing it with higher intentions later. Okay, let's go a little more, and then I want to talk just a bit about Bitul and Pesach. Listen ability. Ele k'mo shekatuv vatihi yirata moti mitzvat anashim lumada.
It also applies even if, as the verse describes it, their fear of me was like commandments of men done by rote.
Right, so here the point the Alter Rebbe is making is don't think that it's only if you did it for self-centered reasons that mitzvah doesn't go up. The mitzvah can elevate also if you just did it by rote. So you do this every day. You can do it without even thinking about it. It's part of who you are. If you keep it on automatic, that mitzvah also cannot ascend to elevate with godliness because you haven't given it wings to do that. You haven't given it the love and the awe. So it's not just the self-centered mitzvah. It's also just lacking intention that doesn't go up. Ela, let's finish this point. Ela k'mo shekatuv vatihi yirata moti mitzvat anashim milumada perush mechamat hergel shehorgal mikatnuto shehirgilo v'limdo aviv rabo liro et Hashem ulavdo. Let's do that whole chunk. So Dan, you go right through to serve him.
Okay, meaning that one serves God out of a habit acquired in his youth, having been trained and taught by his father and teacher to fear God and to serve him.
And so you'd think, oh, I was brought up, I got this from my parents, it's who I am, I never miss it. That's a person that's really going to be doing amazing spiritual work. But beware, the Alter Rebbe says, if this is something you did since you were young, you always did, it's part of who you are, that you never miss it, you're on automatic, you really run the risk of just getting up and it happens without any effort, and now there's no avodah, you haven't created any love and fear to let it soar up, and now that mitzvah is not going anywhere. Yeah, you've created a home for God, as Dan said. You've done it, you plugged it in, but how much light did you allow into that home? Nothing. It's just staying down here at the level of the physical, so to speak. There's a story the Baal Shem Tov was coming up to a shul in a town. The Baal Shem Tov, the first Hasidic master who created this form of Kabbalah, a Kabbalah that you and I can just learn without being steeped in the Zohar and all this. And he got to the door of the shul, and it was full of people praying. And he said, I can't go in because this synagogue is so full of Torah and prayers that there's no room for me. Which is a funny way to say it, right? Here's the Baal Shem Tov, this holy, the mystical genius Jew, and he says, I can't go in. There's so much Torah and prayer in there that I can't even push myself in. There's no room. What did he mean? He meant exactly this. In the time of the Baal Shem Tov, you had common people who, could pray and could read Psalms, but they had no time. Very poor. It was a very depressing. And up early all day, come back exhausted and say evening prayer. That was all they could do. And only a small elite could learn and spend time in the Beis Midrash and pray. Well, it was more learning than praying, but they daven with the depth and understanding of what they were saying. But the Baal Shem Tov was teaching the heart and the love and the awe that the simple Jews were feeling, even if they didn't have any depth of understanding, that allowed their Torah mitzvahs to ascend in a way that many of the scholars of the time, he claimed, could not, because they were so into their intellectual learning and pilpul, which is the argument back and forth, and they were so caught up in creating these intellectual edifices of the intellectual appreciation of Torah, that they had forgotten about just a simple love and awe that the peasants at the time would use that would allow these Torah mitzvahs to fly up. So what was happening in that shul? He's saying, I hear a lot of praying and I hear a lot of Torah being learned, but it hasn't been given wings of love and awe so it can soar up. So where is it? It's staying down here inside the shul. And the synagogue is so packed with so much Torah learning and so much praying without the kavanah to let it ascend up, that it's actually stuffed with that stuff, and I can't even get myself to walk in. I mean, it's so contrary to how I serve God that I can't even open the door. They won't let me in. So a very interesting way the Baal Shem Tov taught this very profound concept. He said, I can't go in. There's too much. It's too full of Torah and prayers for me to enter. The Baal Shem Tov is saying, everyone who has such a scholarly appreciation of the Torah should now turn their minds to creating emotional connection to the Torah, so that now they can get that Torah learning to fly up, to elevate. So we'll start at 571, Ve'eno Osek. Let's start next week. And there's let me go grab something. So this time of the year, there's as we know, eat matzah on Pesach. It's one of the central rituals of Pesach, obviously. And matzah is connected to what we're learning here, because matzah is about bitul, self-nullification. So even though the Alter Rebbe said we're not going to learn about Atzilus and all these tzaddikim, this is another way that we can touch that. And this is also a way we can make sure that the way we do work as seekers and spiritual practitioners in the Jewish pathway, that it stays other-centered and it stays that my divine soul is doing it, and I don't bring the energy back to feed my own ego and perhaps trap it down in the egotistical side of the universe. So there's a special power to do that we get on Pesach, and that is through matzah. So matzah is, if you think about bread is dough that's left to rise, so it puffs up and puffs up and puffs up, and it actually looks much bigger than its real mass, right? Its real mass is just this dump of dough, but it appears maybe 3 or 4 times the size because it's risen up and has lots of puffy air bubbles inside of it, and it's delicious, of course. Matzah, what happens? Matzah, you say, no, not going to allow any of that. I'm going to mix it up and cook it right away before it has a chance to rise, and it's just what you see is what you get, right? There's that much flour, and it's not pretending to be anything bigger than it is physically. It's just flat bread. So we learned that matzah represents bitul. Matzah represents self-surrender, self-nullification. And that is the essence of the world of Atzilus, of that highest world. And it's also the essence of how you want to learn Torah or do a mitzvah or learn Tanya or talk to another Jew. You always want to have that sense of self-surrender so my ego doesn't get in the way of creating value and meaning in the world and elevating that value and meaning. Also, though, in the context of adding light to the mitzvah, I can have store-bought matzah, and if I get, good for a Pesach Seder, not the egg matzah, but, the plain matzah in those square boxes, I'm set, right? I mean, a good chance that is actual kosher matzah. It hasn't been let rise. There's no moisture that got in there. It's got a kashrut on it, and I can eat it on my Seder. And I've actually done the mitzvah. I've created a home for God in my house at my Seder. But is there a way of adding more light? Is there a way of adding more love and awe that will elevate it? That's where I go to my friendly neighborhood supplier, and I get matzah that looks like this, right? So you've probably seen this shmura matzah, and this is a special first baked shmura matzah, so it's an even cooler variety. And if you've not seen it, I won't say it tastes better to your mouth, right? Because it doesn't, although some people like it. But it comes out like this. This is from my last year's Seder, by the way. I'm not just waving around matzah that I'm going to use this year and maybe getting moisture on it, right? So this is older matzah. But it comes out like this. Now talk about the love and awe that a person put into making it, as opposed to matzah that's square, that's made by a machine, that's supervised. Here, a bunch of really, really serious, very heavy duty, believing, like committed Jews got together, and they have like all the ingredients, and there's someone supervising, and they put the timer on, and they mix and they roll, and then they get in the oven, and it cooks, and if it's not done in 18 minutes, it's all thrown out, and then they clean everything, wash everything, and start all over again. And each one, someone made this who cares about whoever's eating it having the optimal experience of bittul. And it was supervised from beginning to end. And when you hear stories of how matzah was made, I was talking to Yisrael Pinson, one of the rabbis here in town. His grandfather used to supervise the making of matzah in Morocco. He said his grandfather would inspect every single kernel to make sure it hadn't become moist and started to sprout or whatever. I don't know what it was. But he would inspect kernel by kernel to make sure that every kernel that went into the matzah was appropriate. I mean, imagine the level of awe and the level of love that takes to do that. We as Reform Jews, we might say, well, that's nonsense. It's, why go through so much lengths? We don't need to be bound by all these restrictions. But I don't look at it as a restriction. I look at it as so much love and so much awe went into this matzah. When I'm at the Seder, I look at it and I'm just, I lose my breath. I'm inspired. And when I'm eating the matzah at the Passover Seder, that adds more light to the mitzvah itself. And to me, it feels like now I have a tool for the rest of the year to keep my ego out as much as possible of the mix when I'm doing this work. Because that's what the matzah is. When you eat it on a Passover Seder, it gives you an extra boost to achieve a higher level of self-nullification, of bittul, and get your ego out of the way for the rest of the year. And you're certainly not doing it for the taste, because the thing tastes horrible, and in your gut, I'm lucky if I wake up the next morning without a stomach ache. So it's clearly I'm not doing it because this is a tasty piece of challah. So let me offer this to anyone this week who's in town. I can actually get extra, not quite this level. It's not the first bake, but it's going to be really nice hand-done shmura matzahs that will add light to any of you, to your Seder when you're eating it. If you'd like to order that, email me at msmolash@temple-israel.org. That's msmolash@temple-israel.org. And a week today, Thursday, I'll bring stacks of boxes. You can have one with your name on it. It's $20 for each box, and each one it'll be somewhere between 8 and 10 nice round shmura matzahs. And these are a little thinner than the one you're looking at. So they'll be a little less like you're eating dehydrated cardboard. But this is really going to add boom to your Seder and your mitzvah if you join me in that. So let me know if you'd like. Email me in between, say, today and Monday. And on Thursday morning, I'll bring some boxes to the front here at Temple Israel. You can pick them up for your Seder and just bring $20, put it in the envelope, and you'll have that for your own Seder. All right, let's finish with a little bit of meditation. So this is how we generate these emotions. All right, let's let our bodies calm down. Let our breath become long and deep. Beautiful. Let's open our breath to the 4 stages of breath we work with together, breathing in, 2, 3, 4. Stay there. 2, 3, 4. Breathing out. 2, 3, 4. Remain empty. 2, 3. Back in again. 1, 2. Your spine is long as you keep it in. 2, 3, 4. Breathing back out. 2, 3. As you continue that pattern on your own, notice the spot under your nostrils. Please breathe in through your nose if you can. And the difference in temperature between the cooler air coming in warmer air flowing out on the spot under your nostrils. Just pay attention to that. Let's open up our wisdom gateway, that space between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath. That gateway where that spark of Chokhmah can enter into my consciousness. Open the door wide. Gateway, let's put this one. I have to see that whole dynamic, that whole concept in your mind. Let it fill your visual mind, your auditory mind, your intellectual mind, your emotional mind. If perhaps you're picturing it in freeze frames instead of moving, picture it moving, animated. Those mitzvahs are rising up with wings of love and awe. I always say, my imagination is not the world of Bria, but behind, above that imagination, there is something more abstract, and we can affect the world of Bria with these intentions. So let that image fill your mind brightly, moving. Let me be within that image until your mind is full to brimming like a cup of wine. If you stay here for 10, 15 minutes, meditating on this divine concept, trust and rest assured, you're creating powerful emotions that are indeed the wings that can elevate your Torah mitzvah throughout the day and the week. If you're with us in the class, please wiggle your hands and toes, open your eyes. Apologies to anyone on Facebook that joined us. We dropped out, so I think Facebook is going to be in 2 chunks. But we'll post this on YouTube, so if you're joining us afterwards, welcome to our online academy. Good to have you. If you want to join us, as always, here in real time in our Zoom, please email maya@temple-israel.org. I'm wishing everybody an amazing, amazing week, an amazing Shabbos, and let's start cleaning our houses out of that chametz, as we always do. Yeah.